6 in the morning. I was not sure if I was dreaming until the knock pounded on my door like a coffin nail. A deputy sheriff stood on my porch. And across the street, my parents watched like they were waiting for fireworks. I saw one word before my heart dropped. Eviction. But what froze my blood was the claim that I had been properly served at an address I had not lived at for over a decade. My name is Raven Garza. And until 6 in the morning on that Tuesday, I believed that the locks on my front door were there to keep strangers out. I was wrong. The locks were just metal tumblers and false security, completely useless against the people who actually held the keys to my destruction. I was pulled from a deep, dreamless sleep by a sound that every homeowner instinctively dreads. It was not the tentative rap of a neighbor borrowing sugar, nor the rhythmic pound of a delivery driver in a rush. This was the heavy, flat thud of a knuckles-hard knock designed to wake the dead and demand attention. It was the knock of the state. It was the sound of authority. I sat up, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The room was bathed in the gray, diluted light of early dawn. I threw the covers off, my bare feet hitting the cold hardwood floor, and moved silently toward the entryway. I did not call out, "Who is it?" because my gut already knew that the answer was nothing good. I pressed my eye to the peephole, the fisheye lens distorting the world outside into a curved, grotesque reality. Standing on my welcome mat was a man in a tan uniform, a wide-brimmed hat, and a utility belt weighed down by a radio, a taser, and a sidearm. His badge caught the weak morning light. I read the name tag pinned to his chest, Deputy Colton Briggs. He held a clipboard against his chest like a shield. Behind him, parked at the curb, was a sheriff's department cruiser. The lights were off. The siren was silent. He had not come with a siren because he did not want to alert the neighborhood. This was a stealth operation, a quiet removal, but he was not the only one out there. My gaze shifted past the deputy's shoulder, across the street to where the neighbor's manicured lawn met the sidewalk. There, standing by the brick mailbox, as if they were waiting for a parade, were Elaine and Victor Garza, my parents. They were dressed fully, not in pajamas or robes, but in their day clothes. My father wore his pressed polo shirt and khakis, his hands clasped behind his back in a posture of relaxed supervision. My mother was clutching her purse, her coat buttoned all the way up. They were not looking at the deputy. They were looking at my front door, and on their faces was not concern, not worry, not the panic of parents seeing law enforcement at their child's home. It was satisfaction. It was a calm, settled look of anticipation, like an audience waiting for the curtain to rise on a play they had written themselves. I unlocked the deadbolt. The sound was loud in the silence of the house. I opened the door just enough to show my face, keeping my body blocked by the frame. The morning air was biting, carrying the scent of damp grass and impending disaster. "Raven Garza?" the deputy asked. His voice was low, professional, devoid of emotion. He was just a mechanic working on the machinery of the law. "That is me," I said. My voice sounded surprisingly steady, though my knees felt like water. "I have a writ of possession for the premises," Deputy Briggs said, looking down at his clipboard. He did not make eye contact. He pulled a thick packet of papers from the clip and extended them toward me. "You are hereby ordered to vacate the property. The eviction order has been finalized. You have until 12 noon today to remove yourself and your personal belongings from the residence. At 12 noon, the locks will be changed." I stared at the papers in his hand. The words did not make sense. Eviction, writ of possession, vacate. "There is a mistake," I said. I did not shout. I did not scream. I knew, with a terrifying clarity, that screaming would only give the audience across the street exactly what they wanted. "I own this house. The title is in my name. I pay the mortgage. There is no landlord to evict me." The deputy looked at me then, his eyes tired. He had heard this before. "Everyone says there is a mistake." "Ma'am, I am just executing the order signed by the judge. The judgment for possession was entered last week after a default. You failed to appear." "I was never served," I said. the cold starting to seep through my thin shirt. I never received a summons. I never received a complaint. How can there be a default judgment if I never knew there was a lawsuit? The file says service was perfected, Briggs said. He tapped the paper. It is all in here. I reached out and took the stack of documents. My hands were shaking. Just a little, but I forced them to be still. I flipped past the cover sheet, past the terrifying bold letters of the eviction order, searching for the affidavit of service. I needed to see the lie. I needed to see how they had done it. I found it on the third page. Proof of service. I read the text, and the air left my lungs. The affidavit stated that the summons and complaint had been served 2 weeks ago at an address that made my stomach turn. 77 Briarwood Lane. I looked up at the deputy, my eyes wide. Officer, this says service was made at 77 Briarwood Lane. Yes, ma'am, he said. I haven't lived at Briarwood Lane for 12 years, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. That was a rental house my parents owned when I was in college. I moved out more than a decade ago. I have owned this house, the one you are standing in front of, for 5 years. My driver's license, my voter registration, my tax bills, everything is registered to this address. The deputy shifted his weight. He looked uncomfortable now. He looked at the house number next to my door, then back at the paper. Well, the order lists this property for the eviction, but if the service was done at an old address, that is a matter for the court. It says here, I continued, reading the fine print, that service was accepted by substitute service on a Jane Doe, co-resident, female, over the age of 18, competent to receive service. I looked across the street. My mother, Elaine, caught my eye. She gave a small, fluttering wave. They served themselves, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. My parents own that house on Briarwood. They sent the process server to their own rental property. My mother answered the door, pretended to be my roommate, or just a person living with me, and accepted the papers. They hid the lawsuit from me until the deadline passed and the default was entered. Deputy Briggs sighed. He adjusted his hat. Ma'am, listen to me. I believe you. You seem like a reasonable person, but I cannot overturn a judge's order on the front porch. As of right now, this is a valid court order. I have to enforce it. If what you are saying is true, you need to go to the courthouse right now. You need to file an emergency motion to stay the eviction. You have to tell the judge there was a defect in service. I have 6 hours, I said. Less, he said, checking his watch. It is 6:15 now. The civil division opens at 8:30. If you are not back here with a stay order signed by a judge by 12 noon, I have to put you out. I have no choice. I looked at the paperwork again. This was a weapon. It was a meticulously crafted weapon designed to ambush me. If I panicked, if I spent the morning crying or packing boxes, I would lose. I would lose the house. I would lose my sanctuary. Can I take a picture of this? I asked. I need the case number. I need the judge's name. You keep that copy, he said. That is your copy. No, I said, my mind racing. I need to document that you served me here, but the paperwork says there, I need to document everything. I turned back into the house, grabbed my phone from the hallway table, and stepped back out. The morning light was getting brighter, sharper. I held the papers up against the doorframe. I opened the camera app. Click, the case caption. Elaine Garza and Victor Garza versus Raven Garza. Click, the cause of action. Unlawful detainer. They were suing me as if I were a squatter in my own home. Click, the proof of service. The address, 77 Briarwood Lane. Click, the recipient of service, Jane Doe. Description: female, approximately 60 years old, gray hair. My mother had not even bothered to lie about her description. She just relied on the process server not knowing who I was. Click, the signature of the judge, Honorable Marisol Keene. I photographed every page. I photographed the deputy's badge number. I photographed the patrol car. You are building a record, Briggs noted. He sounded almost impressed. I am, I said, because at 12 noon, when I come back with that stay, I am going to need proof of exactly what happened here this morning. The deputy nodded. Good luck, Ms. Garza. I hope you make it back in time. He turned to walk back to his cruiser. As he stepped off the porch, the silence of the morning was broken by a voice that I had spent a lifetime trying to please, and the last 5 years trying to escape. Raven! It was my mother. She had stepped off the curb and was walking to the middle of the street, but she did not cross the property line. She knew better than to come onto the land she was trying to steal. Not yet. Raven! Honey! She called out. Her voice was sugary, thick with a performative concern that made my skin crawl. It was the voice she used when neighbors were watching. Don't make this difficult. Just cooperate with the officer. I froze. I lowered the phone, but did not turn my body fully toward her. I looked at her, really looked at her. She was smiling, a tight, sad little smile that didn't reach her eyes, beside her. My father nodded solemnly, playing the part of the heartbroken patriarch forced to use tough love. We are doing this for the family. Raven, she shouted, loud enough for the waking neighborhood to hear. We just want you to be safe. Just let us help you. Help. That was their word for control. Safety. That was their word for prison. They were evicting me to save me. They were stealing my home to protect the family assets. I felt a scream building in my throat. I wanted to yell that they were liars, thieves, frauds. I wanted to scream that I paid for this house with my own money, that the deed was in my safe, that they were manipulating the law to destroy their own daughter. But I looked at the deputy. He was pausing by his car door, watching me. He was looking for a reaction. He was looking for instability. If I screamed, I was the hysterical woman being evicted. If I screamed, I validated their narrative that I was unwell and needed their intervention. Emotional reaction was a luxury I could not afford. Emotions were the cracks where they would drive their wedges. I swallowed the scream. I swallowed the tears that were stinging the corners of my eyes. I looked at my mother one last time. I did not wave. I did not frown. I gave her nothing. I turned my face into a mask of stone. Goodbye, Mother, I whispered, the words lost in the morning wind. I stepped back inside my house. I closed the door. I did not slam it. Slamming doors is for children. I closed it with a soft, definitive click. I leaned my back against the wood, sliding down until I was sitting on the floor of my foyer. The house was quiet. The sun was just starting to touch the windows. 12 noon. I had less than 6 hours to undo a legal knot that had been tied behind my back. I looked at my hands. They were trembling. I made a fist, squeezing until my nails dug into my palms, using the sharp pain to ground myself. No crying, I said aloud to the empty hallway. My voice sounded harsh, foreign. No crying, no begging, no panic. I stood up. The shock was fading, replaced by a cold, crystalline focus. They thought they had won because they caught me sleeping. They thought that by the time I woke up, it would be too late. They thought I would crumble under the weight of the badge and the gavel. They were wrong. I was not going to pack a bag. I was not going to look for a moving truck. I was going to my desk. I was going to turn on my scanner. I was going to draft a motion. I was not a victim. I was the defendant. And the defendant was about to build a record that would bury them. The first rule of survival in a burning house is to know exactly where the exits are. The second rule is to know what to grab before the roof collapses. I had spent 5 years living in a metaphorical burning house, waiting for the smoke to finally clear, so I did not have to think about my next move. My body moved on autopilot, fueled by a cold, sharp adrenaline that felt less like fear and more like high-octane fuel. I walked straight to the hall closet, pushed aside the winter coats I rarely wore in this climate, and reached for the top shelf. My fingers closed around the handle of a heavy, silver box, the fire bag. Most people keep these for actual fires, unexpected electrical shorts or lightning strikes. I kept mine for the human kind of disaster. I pulled it down, the weight of it reassuring in my grip, and carried it to the kitchen island. I unzipped it. Inside was my life, condensed into paper. I pulled out the grant deed first. It was the original, stamped with the county recorder's seal, the blue ink looking as fresh as the day I signed it. Raven Garza, a single woman, no cosigners, no parents, no hidden clauses. Next came the property tax bills for the last 5 years, all paid in full from my personal checking account. Then the homeowner's insurance policy, listing me as the sole beneficiary. And finally, at the bottom, protected by a plastic sleeve, was the letter from my grandfather regarding the distribution of his estate. It was the money from that estate that had bought this house, a fact my parents had conveniently decided to forget. I spread them out on the granite countertop like a general reviewing a battle map. They were just pieces of paper, fragile and flammable, yet they were the only shield I had against the lie standing on my front porch. I looked at the microwave clock, 6:20 in the morning. I grabbed my phone and dialed the number for the Superior Court Civil Division. I knew the number by heart, not because I was litigious, but because I worked in compliance. I knew how the system worked. I knew that even though the counters did not open until 8:30, the automated system and sometimes a diligent clerk would be accessible early for emergency filings. The phone rang 3 times, then a click. Civil Division, automated system, a robotic voice began. I bypassed the menu, punching in the extension for the clerk's office, hoping someone was there prepping the docket. Civil clerk, line 4. A woman's voice answered. She sounded tired, holding a coffee cup in one hand and a phone in the other. "Good morning," I said, forcing my voice to be professional, stripping away the panic. "I need information on a case number immediately. I have a sheriff's deputy at my door with a writ of possession, but I was never served." There was a pause. The word sheriff usually wakes people up. "Case number?" she asked, the typing starting before I even finished speaking. I read the number from the photo I had taken of the deputy's clipboard. 26CV0499. "One moment," she said, the silence stretched, filled only by the hum of my refrigerator. "Okay, Garza versus Garza. Unlawful detainer. Judgment for possession was entered by default on January 27th. January 27th, I repeated, writing the date on a notepad. I was at work all day. I never received a summons. Who signed the proof of service? "Let me pull up the image," the clerk said. I could hear her squinting at a screen. Service was perfected on January 12th. Substituted service at 77 Briarwood Lane. "That is the wrong address," I said, my hand gripping the pen so hard the plastic barrel creaked. "I do not live there. I have not lived there in over 10 years. "Well," the clerk said, her voice detached. "The affidavit says it was accepted by a Jane Doe, described as a female resident, approximately 60 years of age, who refused to give her name but confirmed she resided with the defendant." The trap snapped shut in my mind. It was elegant in its cruelty. They had not just forged a signature, they had physically staged a service. My mother had gone to their rental property, the house on Briarwood that they still owned, and waited for the process server. She opened the door, pretended to be my roommate, accepted the papers meant for me, and then threw them in the trash. The process server went away happy. The court got its proof, and the clock started ticking on a lawsuit I did not know existed. "Ma'am," I said. That woman was the plaintiff. The plaintiff accepted service for the defendant. "That is irregular," the clerk said, a note of hesitation finally entering her voice. "It is fraud," I corrected. "I am coming down to file an emergency motion to stay and a motion to vacate default. Please tell me Judge Keene is sitting today." "She is in Department 12. But you need to get here fast. If the sheriff has the writ, they can lock you out technically whenever they want, though usually they give a grace period." "The deputy gave me until noon," I said. "Then you better drive fast," she said, and hung up. I stood there for a second, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. They had turned me into a fugitive in my own life. By using the Briarwood address, they had created a paper trail that said I was hiding, that I was ignoring the court, that I was a squatter refusing to leave. The law hates squatters. My parents knew that. They banked on the fact that the court would process the paperwork without looking too closely at the family names. I gathered the documents and shoved them into a sturdy leather tote bag. I added my laptop, a portable charger, and a bottle of water. Then I stopped. I needed one more thing. I walked back to the front door. I unlocked it and stepped out onto the porch. Deputy Briggs was still there, leaning against his cruiser, typing something into his onboard computer. He looked up as I emerged. My parents were still across the street, huddled together, their heads turning sharply as I appeared. I walked down the steps, stopping halfway. I did not look at my parents. I looked only at the officer. "Deputy," I said. My voice carried clearly in the crisp morning air. He rolled his window down. "You packing up, Ms. Garza?" "I am going to the courthouse," I said. "I need the direct number for the civil unit dispatch. When the judge signs the stay order, I need to call someone who can radio you immediately to stop the lockout. I do not want to rely on the court clerk's email system." Briggs looked at me for a long moment. He saw the bag on my shoulder. He saw the set of my jaw. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a card. "Call this number," he said, handing it to me. "Ask for Sergeant Miller. He handles the field dispatch. If you get that stay, you tell Miller to raise me on the radio." "Thank you," I said. I turned to go back inside, intending to exit through the garage to the alley, avoiding the spectacle entirely. "Raven!" The voice was deep, booming, and commanded authority. It was my father, Victor. He had stepped off the curb, emboldened by my interaction with the police. "Raven, stop this nonsense!" he shouted. He pointed a finger at me, the same finger that used to direct me to my room when I was 10. "Do not go dragging strangers into this. Don't you dare go make a scene at that courthouse and shame this family." I stopped. My hand was on the doorknob. The morning sun was hitting the side of his face, illuminating the red flush of anger on his cheeks. He was not angry that I was losing my home. He was angry that I was fighting back, to him. The eviction was just a correction. Me fighting it was the rebellion. "Don't shame the family," I repeated, turning my head just enough so he could see my profile. "You heard me?" he yelled. "You are embarrassing us." I looked him dead in the eye. Across the asphalt divide of the street, past the deputy who was watching this domestic tragedy unfold with a neutral gaze. "You shamed the court first," I said. I didn't wait for his reaction. I didn't wait for my mother's inevitable wail of victimhood. I stepped inside and locked the door. I moved quickly now. I went through the kitchen to the back door that led to the detached garage. I did not want to back my car out of the driveway where they could block me in or throw themselves on the hood in a fit of dramatic desperation. I slipped out the back, keypad opened the garage, and got into my sedan. I reversed into the narrow alleyway that ran behind the properties. It was a tight squeeze, lined with trash bins and overgrown bougainvillea, but it was clear. I navigated the car onto the side street. 2 blocks away from where my parents stood vigil, they were waiting for me to come out the front, defeated, crying, begging for a compromise. They wanted the visual of the prodigal daughter breaking down so they could swoop in and save me on their terms. I denied them that image. By the time they realized I was gone, I would be halfway to the Civic Center. The drive to the courthouse was a blur of highway concrete and brake lights. I turned the radio off. I needed silence. I needed to calibrate. I gripped the steering wheel at 10 and 2, forcing my breathing to slow down. Inhale for 4 counts. Hold for 4. Exhale for 4. I created a rule for myself right then and there, a manifesto for the next 6 hours. No emotion. It was unfair, but it was the reality of the legal system. If I walked into that courthouse crying, shaking, or screaming about how my parents betrayed me, I would be labeled. The clerks would see a distraught woman. The judge would see a family dispute. The opposing counsel would see instability. Emotion was the currency of the victim, and victims get pity, but they rarely get court orders. To win, I had to be cold. I had to be a machine. I had to present myself not as a daughter who had been hurt, but as a property owner whose contractual rights had been violated. I had to make this boring. I had to make it about paperwork, jurisdiction, and civil procedure. I looked at myself in the rearview mirror. My hair was pulled back in a severe bun. I was wearing a blazer I kept in the car for client meetings. I looked sharp. I looked like I belonged on the other side of the bench. "You are not Raven," I whispered to the reflection. "You are the defendant. You are a tank." I pulled into the parking structure across from the courthouse at 7:45. It was expensive to park there, $20 for the day, but I didn't care. It was the closest lot. I walked across the pedestrian bridge. The wind whipping at my coat. The courthouse was a massive, brutalist structure of concrete and glass, designed to make you feel small. It usually worked. Today, it just looked like a puzzle I had to solve. I walked to the main entrance. The doors were still locked. A small line had already formed, lawyers in cheap suits checking their emails, anxious defendants smoking one last cigarette, families holding envelopes of evidence. I took my place in line. I did not check my phone. I did not pace. I stood perfectly still, my bag heavy on my shoulder, my eyes fixed on the metal detectors inside the glass lobby. I was here before the doors opened. I was here before the judge had her coffee. I was here before my parents even knew I had left the house. They thought they were teaching me a lesson about power. They forgot that I was the one who handled their estate planning for years before I cut ties. I knew where the bodies were buried because I was the one who had drafted the maps. The security guard unlocked the doors with a heavy clack. "Step forward," he shouted. I stepped forward. I was not there to ask for a favor. I was there to reclaim my existence. The clock was ticking. 4 hours and 15 minutes left. But as I walked through the metal detector, I didn't feel the panic anymore. I felt the cold, hard clarity of someone who has brought a bazooka to a knife fight. The metal detector at the courthouse entrance looked like a gateway to a different dimension. To most people, it was just a security checkpoint, a minor inconvenience involving belts and keys. To me, it was the first barrier between homelessness and salvation. I placed my bag on the conveyor belt, my movements efficient and practiced. The security guard, a heavy-set man with eyes that had seen too much human misery to be surprised by anything, watched me. "Belt off, ma'am," he said, his voice a low drone. I didn't argue. I stripped off my belt and placed it in the plastic bin. I held the eviction paperwork, the sheriff's writ, in my hand like a VIP passed to the worst club in town. I needed him to see it. I needed him to understand that I did not have time for a random search. "I have an emergency lockout at 12 noon, I said, keeping my voice steady but allowing the urgency to vibrate underneath. "I need to get to the civil filing window immediately." He glanced down at the red stamp on the paper in my hand. "Immediate possession." He nodded, a flicker of sympathy crossing his face. He waved me through the archway before I could even finish gathering my shoes. "Second floor. Turn left," he said. "Good luck." I ran up the stairs. I did not wait for the elevator. My heels clicked against the terrazzo floor, echoing like gunshots in the quiet hallway. It was just past 8 o'clock in the morning. The court staff were just unlocking their doors, turning on computers, settling in with their coffee. They moved with the sluggish pace of bureaucracy. I was moving at the speed of survival. I reached the civil division clerk's window. It was closed, the blinds drawn down. A sign taped to the glass read, "Opens at 8:30. I did not sit down. I stood right at the window, my toes touching the wall, willing the blinds to rise. I could hear movement inside, the rustle of paper, the murmur of voices. I tapped on the glass, not a rude bang, but a persistent, sharp rap with my knuckle. A moment later, the blinds rattled up. A woman with short gray hair and reading glasses perched on the end of her nose looked at me with mild annoyance. Her name tag read, Patricia. She looked like she had been working this desk since the Reagan administration. "We open in 20 minutes. Honey," she said, reaching for a stack of files. "I have a sheriff standing on my porch," I said. sliding the writ under the glass partition before she could turn away. "The lockout is at 12 noon today. I was never served. This is a fraudulent default." Patricia stopped. The word fraudulent is thrown around a lot in family court. But in civil evictions, it carries a specific weight. She looked at the time on the wall clock, then down at the writ. She sighed. But it was a sigh of resignation, not refusal. She walked over to her computer and typed in the case number. "Garza versus Garza," she muttered, reading the screen. "Judgment entered last week. Writ issued 3 days ago." She looked up at me, her eyes narrowing behind the glasses. "You are Raven?" "I am Raven Garza," I said, "and I have never seen these papers until 2 hours ago." "Well, the file says you were served," Patricia said. Turning back to the screen, she clicked a few times, bringing up the scanned documents. "Here it is. Proof of service. Personal service was attempted 3 times. Then substituted service was completed on January 12th. "Show me," I said. "Please, print it out." Patricia hit a button. The printer behind her whirred to life. She grabbed the sheet and slid it under the glass. I looked at the document. In the section for person receiving service, the box for substitute service was checked, and there, at the bottom, was the signature of the person who had accepted the papers. It wasn't a scribble, it wasn't illegible, it was clear, looped cursive, written with a steady hand, Elaine Garza. My breath caught in my throat. I had suspected my mother was involved in the deception, but I assumed she would have been smart enough to use a fake name, or just sign resident. But no, she had signed her own name. She had accepted the lawsuit filed by herself and her husband. For me. "She signed it," I whispered, pointing at the name. "The plaintiff signed for the defendant." Patricia adjusted her glasses, leaning in closer. "Wait, Elaine Garza is the plaintiff?" "Yes," I said. "She is my mother. She sued me. Then she went to the service address, which is her own rental property, not my home, and signed for the papers herself. She served herself." Patricia's eyebrows shot up. She pulled the physical file from a cart behind her, opening the manila folder. She flipped through the pages, her casual demeanor evaporating. She compared the signature on the complaint to the signature on the proof of service. They were identical. "That is," Patricia said. She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw the bureaucratic wall crumble. She was no longer just a clerk. She was a witness to a crime. But why did they file this as a landlord-tenant dispute? The complaint says you are a tenant holding over after the expiration of a written lease. "I am not a tenant," I said. I reached into my tote bag and pulled out the contents of my fire bag. I laid them out on the counter, one by one, like playing cards. "This is the grant deed, recorded 5 years ago. I am the sole owner. This is my property tax bill, paid by me. This is my homeowner's insurance policy." Patricia picked up the deed. She ran her thumb over the embossed seal. She looked at the address on the deed, the house where the sheriff was currently waiting. Then she looked at the address on the proof of service, 77 Briarwood Lane. "They served you at a different address," she said, piecing it together. "And they claimed you are a renter." "They had to," I said. "You cannot evict the owner, so they invented a lease." Patricia went back to the file. "There is a lease attached to the complaint as Exhibit A." She pulled out a single sheet of paper and slid it toward me. I looked at it, and a cold laugh bubbled in my chest. It was a joke. It was a generic rental agreement form you could download from the internet for free. The blanks were filled in with a typewriter. My father still used an electric typewriter, and at the bottom, above the line labeled tenant, was a signature that was supposed to be mine. It was shaky. It looked like someone had tried to copy my signature from a memory of a birthday card I had signed 10 years ago. It spelled my middle name with an O instead of an A. "That is not my signature," I said. "And that is not a valid lease. I have never paid them rent because I own the house." Patricia took the deed and the fake lease and held them side by side. She looked at me, and her expression was grave. "Listen to me," she said, her voice low. "If you own the house, This entire lawsuit has a massive defect. It is called standing. You cannot be a plaintiff in an eviction suit if you do not have a landlord-tenant relationship or a superior right to possession. If this deed is real, they have no standing to sue you in this court. The judge hates fake standing. It wastes the court's time, and it is an abuse of process. She turned around and grabbed a stack of color-coded forms from a shelf. She slid them under the glass. "This is an ex parte application to stay execution of judgment," she said, pointing to the pink form. "And this is a motion to vacate default judgment." She pointed to the yellow form. "You need to fill these out right now. Do not wait for a lawyer. You do not have time." She handed me a black pen. "Go to the bench over there. Write clearly. Tell the judge exactly what you told me. Bullet points are better than paragraphs. Judges do not like to read novels in the morning. Focus on the jurisdiction." "Thank you," I said. "When you are done, bring it straight back to me," she said. "I will walk it up to Judge Keene's chambers myself. She takes the bench at 9, if we get this in front of her before she calls the first case. You have a chance." I took the forms and the pen. I walked over to the wooden benches lining the back of the hallway. I sat down. The wood was hard and cold. My hands were trembling again, but I forced them to stop. I took a deep breath, visualizing the deputy's clipboard, visualizing my parents' smug faces across the street. I uncapped the pen. I did not just write. I carved the words into the paper. Grounds for motion. 1. Defective service. I wrote down the details of the Briarwood address. I noted that I had not resided there for over a decade. 2. Fraud on the court. I wrote that the proof of service was signed by the plaintiff, Elaine Garza, creating a conflict of interest and a failure of due process. 3. No landlord-tenant relationship. I wrote that the plaintiff had falsified a lease agreement. I stated clearly, defendant is the sole owner of the property in fee simple. 4. Forged signature. I stated that the signature on Exhibit A was a forgery and did not match my government identification or the signature on the recorded deed. I wrote with a precision I didn't know I possessed. I didn't use emotional language. I didn't write my parents are evil. I didn't write I am scared. I wrote facts. Facts are the bricks you throw through the window of a glass house. Exhibit A. Copy of grant deed. Exhibit B. Copy of property tax bill. Exhibit C. Copy of driver's license showing current address. I finished the last sentence. I looked at the clock. 8:45. I had been writing for 15 minutes. I stood up and walked back to the window. A line had formed now, 3 or 4 people deep. I didn't go to the back of the line. I walked to the side of the window where Patricia was working. She saw me coming. She ignored the man at the front of the line who was trying to ask about a traffic ticket and waved me over. "Let me see," she said. I handed her the packet. She scanned it quickly, her eyes darting back and forth. She nodded. "Good," she said. "This is strong. You attached the deed?" "Yes," I said. She took a stapler and punched it through the corners of my documents with a satisfying thwack. She stamped the top page with a heavy machine that printed the date and time in red ink. Filed. February 3rd, 48 a.m. "Okay," she said. She looked me in the eye. "I'm going to take this up now. You go to Department 12. That is Judge Keene. Sit in the front row. Do not say anything until your case is called. If the bailiff asks who you are, just say you have an emergency ex parte filing." "What about the sheriff?" I asked. "It is almost 9. If the judge signs the stay, we will call the sheriff from the courtroom," Patricia said. "But you have to get that signature first." She stood up, grabbing my file and the thick court jacket. She looked at me one last time, and for a second, the mask of the government worker slipped completely. "My ex-husband tried to forge my name on a car loan once," she said quietly. "I made him walk home in the rain." She turned and disappeared through a door in the back of the office. I stood there for a heartbeat, staring at the empty space where she had been. She had given me a weapon. Now I had to use it. I turned from the window. The hallway seemed brighter now, sharper. The landlord-tenant lie was the crack in their armor. They had tried to fit a complex family betrayal into a simple eviction box, hoping the court wouldn't check the corners. But they had been lazy, they had been arrogant, and in their arrogance, they had handed me the very thing I needed to destroy them: a paper trail of perjury. I walked toward the elevators to go up to Department 12. I checked my phone. 8:50. My parents were probably still standing on the sidewalk, drinking coffee from a thermos, checking their watches, waiting for the clock to strike 12. They thought the game was over. They didn't know that the second half had just begun, and I had just switched sides. I pressed the button for the third floor. The doors opened. I stepped in. As the metal doors slid shut, sealing me in, I felt a strange sense of calm. I wasn't just fighting for a house anymore. I was fighting for the truth, and unlike my parents, I had brought the receipts. Department 12 smelled of floor wax, stale coffee, and the unique, sharp perspiration of people who are about to lose something important. I pushed through the heavy double doors, my heart rate spiking despite my best efforts to control it. The gallery was mostly empty, save for a few lawyers checking their watches and a bored bailiff staring at the ceiling. But the front row was not empty. Sitting on the right side of the aisle, the side reserved for plaintiffs, were my parents. They had beaten me here. They must have had a lawyer monitoring the docket, or perhaps they had simply come to watch the final administrative stamp be put on my destruction. Next to them sat a man in a navy blue suit that fit too perfectly. He had the kind of haircut that cost $300 and a posture that screamed expensive confidence. This had to be Damon Kress. They looked like a portrait of aggrieved respectability. My mother, Elaine, was dabbing her eyes with a tissue, though I knew for a fact her tear ducts were as dry as the Mojave. My father, Victor, sat with his head bowed, looking like a man burdened by the terrible necessity of disciplining a wayward child. They were performing The Reasonable Family, and they were doing it well. I walked to the left side, the defendant's table. I sat down alone. I placed my tote bag on the floor and laid my file on the table. My hands were the only thing betraying me. They were cold as ice. "All rise," the bailiff boomed, his voice cracking the silence. Judge Marisol Keene swept into the room. She was a small woman with reading glasses on a chain and a reputation for having zero tolerance for fools. She sat down, adjusted her robe, and picked up the file that Patricia, the clerk, had walked up just minutes ago. "Calling case number 26CV0499, Judge Keene said, her voice amplified by the microphone. "Garza versus Garza, emergency ex parte application to stay execution of judgment. Damon Kress for the plaintiffs, Your Honor," the lawyer said, standing up smoothly. His voice was a rich baritone, designed to soothe. "And with me are Elaine and Victor Garza, the property owners." "Raven Garza, defendant," I said. Standing up, my voice was thinner than his, but it did not shake. "I am representing myself." Judge Keene looked over the top of her glasses at me, then down at the file. She flipped a page. The silence stretched for 10 seconds, then 20. It was the sound of a judge reading, and it was the most terrifying sound in the world. "Ms. Garza," the judge said, looking at me, "you are asking this court to stop a sheriff's lockout scheduled for 12 noon today. That is in less than 3 hours. Why did you wait until this morning to file?" "Because I only found out about the lawsuit at 6 this morning, Your Honor," I said. "When the deputy knocked on my door, the file indicates you were served on January 12th, Judge Keene said. "There is a proof of service here. That proof of service is fraudulent, Your Honor," I said, sticking to the bullet points I had written in the lobby. "It lists the service address as 77 Briarwood Lane. I have not lived at that address for 10 years. It is a rental property owned by the plaintiffs. I reside at the property in question, where the sheriff came this morning." I paused, then delivered the second blow. "Furthermore, the proof of service states that Jane Doe accepted the papers. I asked the court to compare the signature of Jane Doe on the proof of service with the signature of the plaintiff, Elaine Garza, on the verified complaint. They are the same person. The plaintiff served herself to manufacture a default. Judge Keene's eyes narrowed. She turned to the plaintiff's table. Mr. Kress. Kress didn't flinch. He buttoned his jacket. Your Honor, this is a desperate last-minute delay tactic. Service was performed in substantial compliance with the code. The defendant is well aware of the proceedings. She has been evading communication with her parents for months. We have an affidavit from the process server stating, "Do not read the code to me." Counsel, Judge Keene cut him off. Her voice was like a whip crack. And do not talk to me about substantial compliance when the allegation is fraud. I am looking at the 2 signatures right now. She held the papers up to the light. Answer the question. Counsel, the judge said, her voice dropping an octave. Did your client, Elaine Garza, sign as the recipient of service at the Briarwood address? Kress hesitated, just a fraction of a second. I was not present at the service, Your Honor. However, Mrs. Garza was checking on her rental property that day and she is just so difficult. Your Honor. The interruption came from my mother. Elaine had stood up, clutching her tissue, her face crumpled in a mask of maternal anguish. We tried to talk to her. We tried to help her. She just won't listen, and we had to do this for the family because she is clearly not— Mrs. Garza. Sit down, Judge Keene said. She didn't shout, but the command was absolute. But she is lying, Elaine cried out, a single tear finally managing to escape. We love her, but she is stubborn. That is not an answer to the question of service, Judge Keene said, her eyes cold. And in my courtroom, only the lawyers or the parties speaking under oath address the bench. The judge turned back to the file. She looked disturbed. She flipped another page, then another. She stopped. She frowned, pulling a specific document out of the stack. Ms. Garza, the judge said, looking at me with a new expression. It wasn't sympathy, it was confusion. You state in your motion that you are the sole owner of the property. I am, Your Honor, I said. I attached the grant deed to my application. I see that, the judge said. But the plaintiffs have submitted a supplemental declaration this morning in opposition to your stay. Attached to it is a quitclaim deed. I froze. A what? A quitclaim deed, Judge Keene repeated, dated January 15th of this year, granting all rights, title, and interest in the property from Raven Garza back to Elaine and Victor Garza. The room seemed to tilt sideways. I gripped the edge of the table. A lease was one thing. A lease was a lie about possession. A quitclaim deed was a lie about ownership. They weren't just trying to kick me out. They were stealing the asset itself. They had forged a transfer of title. I did not sign that, I stammered. The wind knocked out of me. I never signed a deed. I have not spoken to my parents in 6 months. I certainly did not give them my house 3 weeks ago. It is notarized, Judge Keene said, looking closely at the document. Notary Public, Lorna Vance. It is a forgery, I said, my voice rising. Your Honor, on January 15th, I was at my office from 8 in the morning until 6 at night. I work at Redwood Meridian Systems. We have security badges. We have parking logs. I can prove I was nowhere near a notary. Judge Keene looked at Kress. Counsel, your client claims to have title based on a deed signed 3 weeks ago. Then why is this an eviction based on a lease? Kress smiled, a tight, pained smile. Your Honor, the transfer was part of a settlement agreement the family discussed. Raven agreed to transfer the property to pay off family debts, but then she refused to vacate. The lease was a structure we used to formalize her tenancy during the transition. The deed is recorded. It is a valid public record. Recorded does not mean valid if the signature is faked, Judge Keene said. She looked at the document again. And the signature on this deed, it looks remarkably different from the signature on the defendant's driver's license she submitted today. Signatures vary, Your Honor, Kress said, shrugging. The document carries the seal of a state-licensed notary. The court must presume it is valid until proven otherwise. The court presumes nothing when the plaintiff is signing her own proof of service at a phantom address, Judge Keen snapped. She slammed the file shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Motion for emergency stay of execution is granted, she ruled. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The sheriff is ordered to stand down immediately, Judge Keen continued, her voice rapid fire. Clerk, notify the civil unit dispatch. No lockout today. Thank you, Your Honor, I whispered. Do not thank me yet, Judge Keen said. She leaned forward, her gaze locking onto Damon Kress. Mr. Kress, this matter is set for an evidentiary hearing tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. And listen to me very carefully. She pointed a finger at the plaintiff's table. You will bring the original quitclaim deed to that hearing, not a copy, the wet ink original, and you will bring Ms. Lorna Vance, the notary public, and you will tell her to bring her notary journal. If that book is not in this courtroom at 9 a.m., I am striking the deed from the record, and I am referring this matter to the district attorney. Kress's smile faltered. Your Honor, that is very short notice to subpoena a notary. Then you better start dialing, Judge Keen said. Court is in recess. She stood up and vanished into her chambers. The bailiff shouted, All rise! But I stayed seated for a moment, my legs feeling like lead. I had won the battle. The eviction was stopped. But the war had just escalated into something nuclear. They had forged a deed. They had committed a felony. I stood up slowly. I packed my papers back into my tote bag. I did not look at the other table. I just wanted to get out, get to my car, and call my boss to get those security logs. I walked toward the aisle. I had to pass them to get to the door. Kress was already on his phone, whispering furiously as he packed his briefcase. My father was staring straight ahead. His jaw clenched so hard a muscle jumped in his cheek. But my mother, she was waiting, as I walked past. She stepped into the aisle, blocking my path for a fraction of a second. She wasn't crying anymore. The tissue was gone. Her face was dry, composed, and terrifyingly blank. She leaned in close, invading my personal space, smelling of the lavender perfume I had associated with comfort when I was 5 and suffocation when I was 15. You just opened a door that you cannot close, she whispered. The English translation in my head was instantaneous, but hearing it in her native cadence made it cut deeper. It wasn't a warning. It was a promise. Excuse me, I said, stepping around her without making eye contact. I didn't look back. I walked through the double doors, past the bailiff, and into the busy hallway. My mother was right. I had opened a door. I had challenged their narrative. I had forced the lie into the light. And now, there was no going back to being the quiet, dutiful daughter who absorbed the damage to keep the peace. I pulled my phone out as I walked to the elevator. I dialed the number Deputy Briggs had given me. Sergeant Miller, a gruff voice answered. This is Raven Garza, I said. Judge Keen just granted a stay in case 26CV0499. The clerk is calling you, but I wanted to let you know. We got the order on the screen right now. Ma'am, the sergeant said. Deputy Briggs has been called off. You are safe for today. Safe, I repeated the word. It tasted like ash. I wasn't safe. I was just armed. And tomorrow, I had to prove that my parents were criminals before they turned me into one. The county recorder's office was located in the basement of the Hall of Administration, a block away from the courthouse, if the courtroom was the theater where the drama played out. This windowless subterranean room was the archive where the scripts were buried. It smelled of ozone, old paper, and the dry recycled air of government bureaucracy. I walked in at 10:15 in the morning. I had not gone back to work. I had called my boss from the car, told him I had a title emergency involving identity theft, which was technically true, and that I would be remote for the next 24 hours. He heard the steel in my voice and didn't ask questions. The room was quiet, lined with rows of computers and heavy-bound books that nobody touched anymore. I took a ticket from the dispenser, number 42, and waited. I didn't have to wait long. The digital board flashed my number, and I walked up to Station 3. The clerk was a young man with a high fade haircut and a lanyard that read, Marcus. He looked bored, clicking a pen against his chin. How can I help you? he asked, not looking up from his screen. I need to file a fraud alert on a property, I said, and I need to pull the metadata for a specific document recorded on January 15th. Marcus stopped clicking the pen. He looked up. People usually came here to record deeds or get copies of birth certificates. They rarely walked in asking for metadata. Address? He asked, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. 1420 Oakwood Terrace, I said. The document number is on this printout. I slid the copy of the quitclaim deed that Judge Keene had identified across the counter. Marcus typed in the address. His screen flickered as the property history loaded. Okay, I see the quitclaim recorded January 15th. Grantor Raven Garza. Grantees Victor and Elaine Garza. What is the issue? I am Raven Garza, I said. And I did not sign that. Marcus looked at me, then at the screen. He didn't gasp. He didn't look horrified. He just nodded, a professional accepting a data discrepancy. Okay, you want to file the fraud notification form? It puts a flag on the APN, so if anything else gets recorded, you get an email. I will file that, I said. But first, I want you to open the digital image of that deed, the high-resolution scan, not the web version. I can do that, he said. He clicked a few times, and a large monitor on the counter swiveled so I could see it. The deed appeared, blown up to actual size. It looked official. It had the recording stamp in the top right corner, the barcode, the fee paid. Zoom in on the notary section, I said. Specifically the commission number. Marcus used the mouse to drag the image and zoomed in. The pixels sharpened. We both stared at the notary stamp of Lorna Vance. Below her signature was her commission number, a string of 7 digits. But something was wrong. There, I said, pointing at the screen. Look at the 5th digit. Marcus leaned in. It looks like a 3? It looks like a 3 written over a 0, I corrected, on the screen. It was undeniable. The stamp had made a faint impression of a 0, but someone had taken a black ballpoint pen and heavily traced a 3 over it, pressing hard enough that the ink had bled slightly even in the scan. That is a manual alteration, Marcus said, frowning. We are not supposed to accept those on a commission number if the stamp is wrong. They have to strike it out, initial it, and stamp it again, or draft a new document. You cannot just doodle on a legal instrument. But you accepted it, I said. I didn't, Marcus said quickly, defensive. The system did. Who submitted it? I asked. I want the intake log. I want to know if this was walked in over the counter or e-recorded. Marcus hesitated. I can give you the recording details. It is public record. He clicked on a tab labeled Ingestion Data. It was e-recorded, he said. Timestamp, January 15th at 4:12 in the afternoon. Who was the submitter? I asked. It came through a third-party vendor. He read from the screen. Harborline Title Solutions. Harborline, I repeated. I pulled a small notebook from my bag and wrote the name down. Do you have the name of the individual agent at Harborline who uploaded the batch? Usually it is just an account number, Marcus said. He clicked deeper into the file properties. Wait, there is a user tag in the XML data. It says, sub_agent, L, Moreno. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Moreno. It was a common name. There were thousands of Morenos in the state, but in my family, it was specific. My mother's maiden name was Moreno. She had a younger brother, my Uncle Lucas, who had drifted in and out of consulting jobs for years. I hadn't seen him since a funeral 4 years ago, but I knew he had worked in real estate processing at some point. It was a small detail, a tiny digital fingerprint left on a file because someone was sloppy, or arrogant, or just didn't think anyone would ever look at the XML data. L. Moreno, I whispered. My parents hadn't just found a crooked notary. They had kept it in the extended family. They had used blood to steal blood. Can you print that? I asked. I want the image of the altered number, and I want the data sheet showing Harborline and the agent name. I can print the image and the receipt, Marcus said. The receipt shows the submitter. Do it, I said. And I want to know who at this office approved it. Who was the examiner? Marcus looked uncomfortable now. He was realizing that this wasn't just a complaint. This was an investigation. He checked the audit trail. It was auto-verified, he said quietly. Sometimes, with high-volume trusted vendors like Harborline, the system spot checks. If the index matches, it goes through. This one, it might have slipped past the visual review. It didn't slip, I said. It was pushed. Print everything. The printer behind him hummed to life. The pages slid out, warm and crisp. The heat of the paper felt good in my hands. It felt real. For weeks, I had been fighting ghosts, missing summons, fake tenants, invisible lawsuits. Now, I had something physical. I had a name, Harborline. I had a suspect, L. Moreno, and I had a smoking gun, a manually altered notary number that never should have made it into the public record. Marcus handed me the stack. You should keep these in a safe place, he said, his voice dropping to a confidential tone. If that number is wrong, the deed is technically invalid on its face. The court will like this. The court is going to love it, I said. I filled out the fraud notification form. My pen carving deep into the paper, I handed it back to him. Flag it, I said. If anyone tries to sell, refinance, or record a lien against my house, I want to know before the ink is dry. It is in the system now, Marcus said. You will get an email confirmation within the hour. I walked out of the recorder's office and into the blinding sunlight of the Civic Center Plaza. I felt heavy, but it was a good weight. It was the weight of ammunition. I drove straight to a hardware store on the outskirts of town. I did not go to the one near my house. I didn't want to run into neighbors. I walked to the aisle with the locks and deadbolts. I didn't look at the prices. I looked at the security ratings. I bought a heavy-duty electronic deadbolt with a keypad and a physical key backup. I bought a reinforced strike plate with 3-inch screws that would anchor the lock deep into the structural stud of the door frame, not just the trim. If they wanted to get in again, they would have to take the wall down with them. Then I went to the electronics aisle. I bought a video doorbell and 2 wireless stick-up cameras. I needed eyes. I needed a record that didn't sleep. I drove home. It was 1 o'clock in the afternoon. As I turned onto my street, my stomach tightened. They were still there. My father's gray sedan was parked directly across from my driveway, facing my house. They were sitting inside, the engine idling to run the heater. They were watching. It was a siege. They were waiting for me to leave, or waiting for me to break, or perhaps just waiting to remind me that they were always there. I pulled into my driveway and hit the garage remote. I didn't look at them. I drove in and closed the garage door before I turned off the engine. I was not going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me glance in their direction. I entered the house from the garage. I dropped my bag on the kitchen table and went straight to work. I changed into jeans and a sweatshirt. I got my toolbox. I started with the front door. I unscrewed the old lock. The lock whose key my parents likely had a copy of. A spare I might have given them 5 years ago, just in case. I threw it in the trash. I installed the new deadbolt, driving the 3-inch screws into the wood with a power drill. The sound of the drill was loud and aggressive. Whir-chunk, whir-chunk. It sounded like I was building a fortress. I mounted the video doorbell. I synced it to my phone. The feed came alive on my screen. A wide-angle view of my porch, my lawn, and the street beyond. There they were on the small screen, the gray sedan. I could zoom in. I could see the silhouette of 2 heads in the front seat. I went to the side window and mounted a second camera facing the driveway. I mounted the third one in the living room, facing the back door. Every entry point was covered. Every movement would trigger a notification. Every second would be time-stamped and uploaded to a cloud server they couldn't touch. I sat down at my dining table and opened my laptop. I created a new folder on my desktop. I named it Case 26 CV0499. I started subfolders: 01_court_docs, 02_evidence_photos, 03_recorder_data, 04_Harborline_title. 05 underscore surveillance underscore logs. I scanned the documents Marcus had given me. I uploaded the photos I had taken of the deputy this morning. I downloaded the video clip from the doorbell camera showing their car parked outside. Then, my phone pinged. An email notification. Subject: Fraud alert. Confirmation: APN 554-90-221. It was from the county recorder. The flag was active. I sat back, staring at the screen. The pieces were coming together, forming a picture that was uglier than I had imagined. This wasn't just my parents being controlling. This was a synchronized operation. They had a lawyer, Damon Kress, who was slick enough to file the eviction but possibly kept in the dark about the forgery. Or maybe he was part of it. They had a notary, Lorna Vance, who was willing to alter a commission number. They had a submitter, L. Moreno, likely Uncle Lucas, who worked for or had access to Harborline Title Solutions to push the bad deed through the electronic gate. My parents were the beneficiaries, but they were not the architects. They didn't know how to edit XML data or e-record deeds. Someone was guiding them. Someone had told them, "We can get the house back, but we have to move fast, and we have to cut corners." I looked at the live feed of the gray sedan again. My mother was leaning her head against the window. She looked tired. Good. They thought they were besieging me. They didn't realize I was just gathering intelligence. I typed a new note in my digital file. To do: background check on Harborline Title Solutions. Connect L. Moreno to the firm. Subpoena the notary journal. I wasn't afraid anymore. Fear is what you feel when you don't know what is in the dark. I had turned the lights on. I had cameras. I had metadata. And I had the timestamps. I watched the screen as a delivery truck drove by. The camera tagged the motion. Motion detected. 1:15 p.m. "I see you," I whispered to the screen, looking at the gray car. "And now, the judge is going to see you too." I went to the kitchen and made a pot of coffee. It was going to be a long night of research. I had to be ready for the evidentiary hearing at 9 tomorrow. I had to be ready to catch a notary in a lie. And I had to be ready to look my mother in the eye and prove that her definition of family was actually a felony. The electronic chime of the new doorbell I had just installed did not sound like a greeting. It sounded like an alarm. It was 3:30 in the afternoon, and the sun was beginning its slow descent, casting long, sharp shadows across my living room floor. I was sitting at the dining table, surrounded by the fortress of paper I had built, when the sound cut through the silence. Ding-dong, ding-dong, ding-dong. It was not a polite interval. It was a continuous, rhythmic assault. Someone was leaning on the button, or pressing it repeatedly in a spasm of impatience. I did not jump. I did not run to the window. I picked up my phone and tapped the app for the doorbell camera. The video feed loaded instantly. Victor and Elaine were standing on my porch. My father was the one pressing the button, his finger jabbing at the plastic casing as if he could physically drill through the house. My mother stood behind him, looking over her shoulder at the street, checking to see if the neighbors were watching. They looked less like parents and more like debt collectors who had run out of time. I walked to the front door. I did not unlock the new deadbolt. I did not undo the latch. I stood on the other side of the solid wood, separated from them by 3 inches of oak and steel. I raised my phone, hit record video, and held it close to the doorframe. "Go away," I said. I didn't shout. I spoke clearly, aiming my voice at the seam of the door. The ringing stopped instantly. Silence hung heavy for a second. "Raven?" It was my father's voice. It was pitched lower now, trying to sound reasonable, the voice he used when he was trying to sell a bad insurance policy to a skeptical client. "Raven, open the door. We saw you drive in. We know you are in there." "I am in here," I said, "and you are out there. That is how it is going to stay." "We need to talk," Victor said. "Face to face, no lawyers, no judges, just us. We can fix this. We can settle this right now." "We are past settling," I said. "You tried to evict me this morning. You tried to throw me on the street with 6 hours of notice. That was a formality," he argued. his voice rising slightly. "It was just a legal maneuver to get your attention. We didn't mean for the sheriff to actually put you out. We just wanted you to come back to the table." I almost laughed. It was such a darkly absurd lie. The sheriff had a writ of possession. Victor. He wasn't there to deliver a greeting card. He was there to change the locks. "Raven, please." My mother's voice cut in. She sounded closer to the door now. "Open the door. Let us explain. We are a family. We solve things as a family." "Family?" I repeated the word. It tasted bitter. Family does not sue each other under false pretenses. Family does not forge signatures. Family does not use the court to ambush their daughter at 6 o'clock in the morning. "You are being dramatic," Elaine said, the sweetness in her voice curdling into frustration. "You are destroying our future. Raven. You are destroying everything we worked for, all because of some papers. You are going to ruin us over paperwork." "Papers?" I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door. "Is that what you think this is? Just papers?" "That is all it is," she insisted. "We can tear them up. We can write new ones. Just open the door and let us explain the plan. The developer needs the title clear by Friday. If you just sign, we can all walk away with money. Enough for everyone." There it was. The confession. They didn't care about the house. They didn't care about me. They had a deadline with a developer, and I was the obstacle. "The papers are the truth." "Mother," I said, my voice cold and final. "And you are not running from me. You are being chased by the truth. And the truth moves faster than you do." "Raven!" Victor shouted, slapping the door with his open palm. "Don't you dare walk away from me." "I am not walking away," I said. "I am standing right here. But this door stays closed until I see you in court tomorrow." I stepped back. I could hear them muttering on the porch. I heard my father curse. Then, heavy footsteps retreating down the path. I checked the camera feed. They walked back to the gray sedan, got in, and slammed the doors. They didn't drive away. They just sat there, resuming their watch. I stopped the recording on my phone, video saved. I went back to the dining table. My heart was beating hard, not from fear, but from the toxicity of the interaction. Dealing with them was like handling radioactive material, even with protection. You felt the sickness seeping in. I tried to focus on the task list I had made. I needed to organize the exhibits for tomorrow. Then, my cell phone rang. I looked at the screen. It wasn't a saved number. It was a toll-free number starting with 800. I usually ignored these calls, assuming they were telemarketers. But today my adrenaline was high. I answered. "This is Raven," I said. "Good afternoon, Ms. Garza," a professional male voice said. "This is David from the Fraud Prevention Department at Sovereign Bank. I am calling to verify a transaction on your account." My stomach dropped. I banked with Sovereign. My mortgage was with them. "What transaction?" I asked, sitting up straighter. "We received an urgent application for a home equity line of credit on your property at 1420 Oakwood Terrace," David said. "The application was submitted online roughly 2 hours ago. It is asking for an expedited disbursement of $200,000. The room spun. 2 hours ago, while I was at the recorder's office, while I was buying locks, they weren't just trying to sell the house to a developer. They were trying to strip the equity out of it first. They were trying to drain the blood from the body before the court declared it dead." "I did not apply for a line of credit," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "I did not authorize anyone to apply for me." "I see," David said, his tone shifting from polite to serious. "The application was submitted using your name, but the contact phone number listed is different from what we have on file, and the income verification documents uploaded, they look a bit irregular." "David," I said, gripping the phone, "listen to me very carefully. I am currently in a legal dispute regarding the title of this house. Someone has forged a deed transferring the property out of my name. I believe the people who forged that deed are trying to borrow against the equity before the court voids their transfer." "Okay," David said. I could hear him typing furiously in the background. "This is very serious. The application is fraudulent, I said. Block it, deny it, and freeze my credit. I am placing a code red fraud alert on the property profile right now, David said. No loans, no lines of credit, no second mortgages can be issued. I am also flagging the application for our internal investigation team. I need a record of this, I said. I need to know exactly when it was filed and from what IP address. If you have it. I can't give you the IP address over the phone without a subpoena, David said, but I can give you the reference number for this fraud report, and I can confirm that the application has been stopped. Give me the number, I said. I wrote it down in my notebook, underlining it twice. Ref. Fraud-H-E-L-O-C-9921. Thank you, David, I said. You might be hearing from my lawyer. We will keep the file open, he said. Stay safe. Ms. Garza. I hung up and stared at the wall. They were desperate. That was the only explanation. You don't try to pull a $200,000 equity loan on a disputed property unless you need money immediately, or unless you know the game is ending and you want to grab what you can before the lights come on. They were going to cash out the equity, let the foreclosure happen later, and leave me with a mountain of debt and a stolen house. It was predatory. It was vile. I couldn't just sit there. I needed to solidify my defense for tomorrow. The judge wanted proof that I wasn't at the notary on January 15th. I opened my laptop and composed an email. I addressed it to the head of corporate security at Redwood Meridian Systems. Subject: Urgent. Security data. Request for Raven Garza. Employee ID 4490. Dear Mr. Henderson, I am involved in a civil litigation matter involving identity theft. I need to prove my physical presence at the office on January 15th of this year. Please provide the following logs for that date. 1. Building access badge swipes for my ID card. 2. Parking garage gate logs for my vehicle license plate. 3. Any available lobby camera footage showing my arrival and departure. I need this for a court hearing tomorrow morning. I understand this is short notice, but it is critical. Sincerely. Raven Garza. I hit send. I knew Henderson. He was a stickler for rules. But he liked me. He would pull the logs. The sun went down. The house grew dark. I went around and turned on every light in the downstairs area. I didn't want any shadows. I checked the camera feeds on my phone. The gray car was still there, a dark lump under the street lamp. I made myself a sandwich for dinner but couldn't eat more than 2 bites. My stomach was a knot of tension. At 8:45, my phone buzzed with a text message. It wasn't my parents. It wasn't the bank. It was a number I didn't recognize. Tomorrow come to court. You lose more than the house. I stared at the glowing letters. It was a threat. It wasn't subtle. It was vague enough to be plausible deniability. Oh, we just meant she would lose the case. But specific enough to chill my blood. Lose more than the house. What did that mean? My job? My safety? My life? I didn't reply. Engaging with a bully only validates them. I took a screenshot of the message. I emailed the image to myself and saved it in the 02_evidence_photos folder. Then I called the non-emergency line for the city police. Dispatch, a woman answered. I want to file a report for telephone harassment and threats. I said. I am already the victim in a pending fraud case, and I just received a threatening text message related to a court hearing tomorrow. Are you in immediate danger, ma'am? She asked. I am locked in my house with security cameras, I said, but the people threatening me are parked across the street. Do you want an officer to come out? I thought about it. If a patrol car showed up, my parents would drive away. They would claim they were just visiting. They would play the victim, and the police would leave, and they would come back. No, I said. I just want the report number. I want to be able to tell the judge tomorrow that I filed a report. She took my details. She gave me the incident number. If they try to enter your property, call 911 immediately, she advised. I will, I said. I hung up. I checked the locks again. The new deadbolt felt solid. The 3-inch screws held the door like a bank vault. I looked at the clock. 9:30. I needed to sleep. It seemed impossible, but I knew the biology of stress. If I stayed up all night pacing and watching the camera feed, I would walk into court tomorrow with red eyes and shaky hands. I would look manic. I would look exactly like the unstable daughter my mother was painting me to be. I had to look rested. I had to look sharp. I had to be the most sane person in the room. I went upstairs. I didn't turn on the bedroom light. I undressed in the dark. I laid out my clothes for tomorrow. A charcoal suit, a crisp white blouse, low heels, armor. I crawled into bed. I pulled the heavy duvet up to my chin. I forced my eyes to close. "You are safe," I whispered to myself. "The door is locked. The camera is recording. The evidence is backed up." I breathed in slowly, counting the seconds. Outside, in the dark, my parents were waiting, but they were waiting for the old raven, the one who would crumble, the one who would open the door to make the noise stop. That raven didn't live here anymore. I drifted into a shallow, vigilant sleep, clutching my phone like a weapon in my hand. Tomorrow, the gavel would fall, and I would make sure it fell on them. The air in Department 12 was different this morning. Yesterday, it had been a place of administrative boredom, smelling of stale coffee and indifference. Today, it felt like an operating theater where someone was about to be cut open. I arrived at 8:45. I walked down the center aisle, my heels making a sharp, deliberate sound on the linoleum. I was wearing my charcoal suit, the one that made me feel like I was encased in armor. I carried my tote bag, but inside, the chaos of loose papers had been replaced by 3 neat, binder-clipped stacks of evidence. I looked at the plaintiff's table. My parents were already there. They were not alone. Sitting directly behind them, on the edge of the wooden bench, was a woman I recognized instantly from the small photo on the Notary Commission website, Lorna Vance. She was younger than I expected, maybe in her late 30s, with hair that had been dyed a brittle blonde and roots that were showing. She was clutching a heavy black ledger against her chest like a life preserver. She looked terrified. Her eyes darted around the room, landing on the bailiff, then the flag, then the exit sign. She did not look at me. My mother, Elaine, was leaning back, whispering something to Lorna. I saw Lorna nod, a jerky, mechanical motion. My mother was coaching the witness right here in the open. It was arrogant. It was desperate. I sat down at the defendant's table. I did not look at them again. I took out my notepad and a pen. I placed my phone, turned off, face down. I was ready. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. Judge Marisol Keene entered. She did not glide. She marched. She took the bench, her robe settling around her like storm clouds. She didn't look at the docket list. She looked straight at the lawyers. "Case number 2-6CV-0499, she said, her voice crisp. "Garza versus Garza. This is an evidentiary hearing regarding the validity of the underlying title and service of process." She leaned forward, interlacing her fingers. "Mr. Kress," she said, addressing the plaintiff's lawyer, "I ordered you to bring the original quitclaim deed and the notary public with her journal. Do you have them?" Damon Kress stood up. He looked less polished than yesterday. There was a sheen of sweat on his forehead. "Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Lorna Vance is present." "Good," Judge Keene said. "Swear her in." Lorna Vance stood up. She walked to the witness stand, her legs visibly shaking. She raised her right hand. The bailiff rattled off the oath. "I do," Lorna whispered. "Sit down, Ms. Vance," the judge said. "Place the journal on the stand in front of you." Lorna placed the black book on the wooden ledge. "Now," Judge Keene said, extending her hand, "hand me the original quitclaim deed." Kress walked up and handed a document to the bailiff, who handed it to the judge. Judge Keene put on her glasses. She examined the paper for a long, silent minute. She ran her finger over the raised seal of the notary stamp. She held the paper up to the light, looking at the ink signature. "Ms. Vance," the judge began, her voice deceptively conversational. "You notarized this document on January 15th of this year. Is that correct?" Yes, Your Honor, Lorna said. Her voice was thin, reedy. And the grantor, Raven Garza, appeared before you in person? Yes, Lorna said. She cleared her throat. Yes, she did. Where did this signing take place? At a coffee shop, Lorna said. On 4th Street, near the title company. I see, the judge said. And did you verify the identity of the signer? Of course, Lorna said. Gaining a little confidence. I always do. It is the law. What form of identification did you use? Her driver's license, Lorna said. A California driver's license. Open your journal to the entry for January 15th, Judge Keene ordered. Lorna fumbled with the book. She flipped pages, her fingers nervous. Here, line 4. Read the entry to the court, the judge said. Specifically the column for identification. Lorna looked down. She hesitated. It says, driver's license, California. Read the number. Ms. Vance, the judge commanded. The ID number you recorded from the license you held in your hand. Lorna swallowed hard. B 8 9 4 2 2 1 0. The judge wrote the number down on her pad. She looked up at me. Ms. Garza, the judge said to me. Stand up. I stood up. Do you have your driver's license with you? I do, Your Honor, I said. Please state the last 3 digits of your driver's license number for the record. 442, I said clearly. The courtroom went silent. Ms. Vance, the judge said, turning back to the witness. The number you just read ends in 1, 0. The defendant says her license ends in 4, 4, 2. How do you explain that? Lorna's face went pale. I might have written it down wrong. It was busy. The coffee shop was loud. I might have transcribed it incorrectly. You transcribed 8 digits incorrectly? The judge asked. That is a lot of typos for a public official. Kress stood up. Your Honor, if I may. Sit down, Mr. Kress, Judge Keene snapped. She didn't even look at him. I am questioning the witness. She turned back to Lorna. Let's look at the signature. Ms. Vance, in your journal, the person who appeared before you had to sign your book. Is that correct? Yes, Lorna said. Bailiff, please show the defendant the journal entry, the judge said. The bailiff took the book from Lorna and brought it to my table. He held it open to the page. I looked at the signature on line 4. It was a loop-de-loop scrawl. It looked nothing like my handwriting. It looked like someone trying to write Raven with their non-dominant hand. That is not my signature, I said. And the timestamp in the first column says 10:15 in the morning. Is that significant? Ms. Garza? The judge asked. It is, Your Honor, I said. May I approach the bench with evidence? You may. I walked forward and handed the bailiff my first stack of papers. These are security logs from Redwood Meridian Systems, where I am employed as a senior compliance officer, I said. Exhibit A is the badge access log for January 15th. It shows that I swiped into the secure server building at 8:05 in the morning. I did not swipe out until 12:30 for lunch. Exhibit B is the parking structure log. My car entered at 7:50 and did not leave until 6:10 in the evening. Judge Keene took the logs. She scanned them. She looked at the timestamps. She looked at the notary journal. Ms. Vance, the judge said, her voice dropping to a dangerous chill. According to these automated security logs, the defendant was locked inside a secure corporate facility at 10:15 in the morning. Yet your journal says she was signing a deed in a coffee shop on 4th Street at that exact time. Lorna started to sweat profusely now. Maybe I wrote the time wrong. Maybe it was the afternoon. I do a lot of signings. The entry above it is time-stamped 9:45, the judge pointed out, looking at the book. The entry below it is time-stamped 11 o'clock, unless you travel through time. Ms. Vance, you could not have been in the afternoon. Lorna opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Let me remind you, Judge Keene said, leaning over the bench, that perjury is a felony. Filing a false public instrument is a felony, and I am about to refer this entire transcript to the district attorney. Now, I am going to ask you one more time. The judge removed her glasses. She stared directly into Lorna's eyes. Did Raven Garza sign that document in your presence? The room was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. I could hear Cress clicking his pen cap. Lorna Vance froze, her eyes panic-stricken. She did the one thing that gave the entire game away. She didn't look at the judge. She didn't look at the lawyer. She turned her head and looked directly at my mother. It was a fast glance, a desperate plea for help, a silent, "What do I do?" But everyone saw it. The bailiff saw it. The court reporter stopped typing. I saw it, and Judge Keene saw it. My mother, Elaine, sat stone-faced, staring straight ahead, cutting the line. She was abandoning the ship. She offered no nod, no reassurance. She let Lorna drown. Lorna turned back to the judge. Her shoulders collapsed. She looked small, defeated, and broken. "No," she whispered. The word hung in the air like smoke. "I cannot hear you," Judge Keene said. "No," Lorna said, her voice cracking, tears spilling over. "She wasn't there. It was... Mrs. Garza brought the deed to me. She said Raven had already signed it, but couldn't come because of work. She asked me to do a favor. She gave me the license info from a piece of paper." "And you notarized it anyway?" the judge asked. "She said it was for the family," Lorna sobbed. "She said they were trying to save the house. I didn't get paid extra. I felt bad for them." "You felt bad," Judge Keene repeated, her voice dripping with disdain. "So you committed fraud." The judge slammed her gavel down. Not to end the session, but to punctuate the moment. "The court finds that the quitclaim deed recorded on January 15th is a forgery," Judge Keene announced. Her voice boomed. "It is void ab initio. The signature was falsified. The notarization was fraudulent." She turned to Damon Cress. The lawyer was standing now, trying to distance himself from his clients. "Mr. Cress," the judge said, "your clients have perpetrated a fraud on this court. They manufactured a default judgment using a false address. They submitted a forged lease, and they attempted to seize property using a forged deed." "Your Honor, I had no knowledge," Cress began. "Save it for the Bar Association," Judge Keene cut him off. "I am vacating the default judgment immediately. The writ of possession is recalled and quashed. The underlying complaint for unlawful detainer is dismissed with prejudice." She turned to me. "Ms. Garza, the stay is permanent. The house is yours. But I am not done." She looked at the bailiff. "Take custody of the notary journal and the original deed. These are now evidence in a criminal referral. I am sending a bench order to the district attorney's office and the Secretary of State's Notary Division recommending the immediate suspension of Miss Vance's commission and an investigation into forgery and conspiracy." Lorna put her face in her hands and began to weep audibly. "And as for you," Judge Keene said, looking at my parents. Victor was staring at the table, his face a mask of red fury. Elaine was looking at me. Her expression wasn't one of regret. It was one of pure, unadulterated hatred. She looked like a predator that had just had its teeth pulled. "I am issuing a restraining order protecting the defendant and the property," the judge said. "You are to come nowhere near 1420 Oakwood Terrace. You are to have no contact with the defendant. If you violate this, you will be arrested." She gathered her papers. "This court is adjourned. Ms. Vance, do not leave this building. The sheriff's deputies will want to speak with you." Judge Keene stood up and swept out of the room. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the wreckage of a family that had finally hit the wall. I stood up. My legs felt shaky. But I was upright. I gathered my logs. I gathered my notepad. Lorna was being led to a side bench by the bailiff. Cress was packing his briefcase with frantic speed, not looking at my parents. "You are on your own," I heard him hiss at Victor. Do not call my office. He stormed out. That left me and my parents. My father stood up. He looked smaller than he had yesterday. The pompous authority was gone, replaced by the confusion of a man who had never been told no by the world before. But my mother. She stood up slowly. She smoothed her skirt. She turned to face me across the aisle. You think you won, she said. Her voice was low, devoid of the sweet mother act she had played for the judge. You think because you have a piece of paper, you are safe. I don't think I won, I said. Meeting her gaze, I felt a strange sense of pity, not for what was happening to them, but for who they were. They were empty. They were hollow people who tried to fill themselves with things that didn't belong to them. I know I won. The judge just said it. You have no family now, she said. You are an orphan. I have been an orphan for a long time, I said. I just finally got the paperwork to prove it. I turned my back on them. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, and the easiest. I walked toward the doors. Raven, my father called out. It was a command. I didn't stop. I didn't flinch. I walked through the double doors and into the hallway. I pulled out my phone. I had a text from Marcus at the recorder's office. I saw the minute order update. Nice work. Do you want me to record the court order against the title immediately? I typed back, yes, record it, lock it down. I walked to the elevator. I felt lightheaded. The adrenaline was crashing, leaving me exhausted. But as the elevator doors opened, I saw a reflection of myself in the mirrored wall. I wasn't the scared girl who woke up at 6 a.m. to a pounding on the door. I was the woman who had stared down a perjury trap and walked out with the truth. I stepped into the elevator. I pressed the button for the lobby. I was going home, and for the first time in 5 years, it was actually going to be my home. But I knew it wasn't over. The judge had mentioned a criminal referral, the district attorney, the fraud investigation. My parents weren't just evicted from my life. They were about to be indicted. And as the elevator descended, I realized the sinking feeling in my stomach wasn't guilt. It was the realization that I would have to testify against them. I would have to be the one to put the handcuffs on the people who gave me life. One step at a time, I whispered to the empty car. Just one step at a time. The doors opened to the lobby. The sun was streaming in through the glass walls. It was bright. It was blinding. I walked out into the light. The corridor outside Department 12 was a vacuum of sound, the kind of silence that follows a detonation. I watched from the doorway as Damon Kress, a lawyer who had walked in that morning with the swagger of a man collecting an easy paycheck, practically dragged my parents toward the exit. He was walking fast, checking his phone, likely calculating how quickly he could disengage from a client who had just implicated him in a felony fraud. My mother, Elaine, was no longer dabbing her eyes. The performance was over. The distraught mother mask had been peeled away by the judge's gavel, revealing something far sharper and uglier underneath. She wasn't looking at the floor in shame. She was looking at the back of Kress's head with a mixture of fury and calculation. She was already looking for the next angle, the next loophole. My father, Victor, just looked old. The air of patriarchal authority he had worn like a suit of armor for 30 years had evaporated, leaving a confused, angry man who couldn't understand why the world wasn't obeying him. I waited until the elevator doors swallowed them whole. Only then did I let my shoulders drop. I didn't celebrate. You don't celebrate when you amputate a limb to save your life. You just survived the surgery. I turned back to the clerk's desk inside the courtroom. The bailiff was boxing up the notary journal. I need certified copies of the minute order and the judgment, I told the court clerk. As many as you can give me. I can give you 3 right now, she said, the printer already humming. The judge put a rush on the finalization. She wants this in the system. I paid the fees, $40 per copy, with my credit card. My hand didn't shake. I took the documents, the embossed seals of the court raising the paper like braille. These weren't just papers. They were iron bars. I left the courthouse and walked straight back to the county recorder's office. It was the same walk I had made yesterday, but the distance felt different. Yesterday, I was a victim trying to flag a crime. Today, I was the executioner coming to deliver the verdict. Marcus was at the counter again. He looked up, saw me, and a small, knowing smile touched his lips. He had seen the minute order update in the system. Gossip moves faster than paperwork in county government. "You got it," he said. It wasn't a question. "I got it," I said. I slid the certified court order across the cool granite counter. "I want to record this immediately. Order voiding deed ab initio. And I want to record a request for notice on any future filings." "This effectively kills the quitclaim," Marcus said, scanning the document. "It puts the title back in your name retroactively to the date of the fraud." "Do it," I said. "I want the world to know that the deed was a lie." He processed the recording. Stamp chunk. The sound was heavy. Final. "It is done," Marcus said, handing me the receipt. "The property is locked down, if they try to sell it now. The title search will pull up a court order calling them forgers." I walked out of the recorder's office at 11 in the morning. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was an email notification. Subject: Correction Notice. File 88921. Harborline Title Solutions. I stopped on the sidewalk, squinting against the glare of the sun. I opened the email. It was from a compliance officer at Harborline, the company that had e-recorded the fake deed. "Dear Ms. Garza, we are writing to inform you of a clerical error regarding the recording on January 15th. Upon internal review triggered by your fraud alert, we have determined that the intake data provided by our independent contractor, Mr. Lucas Moreno, contained discrepancies regarding the notary verification. We are conducting a full audit of all files submitted by Mr. Moreno's branch. We apologize for the inconvenience." I laughed. A dry, humorless sound. It was the non-apology of a corporation trying to avoid liability, but they had slipped. They had put it in writing. Mr. Lucas Moreno, Uncle Lucas, my mother's brother, the man who always had a big deal just around the corner. My parents hadn't just used a crooked notary. They had used family to traffic the paperwork. Harborline was trying to throw him under the bus to save their license, and in doing so, they had handed me the next link in the chain. I forwarded the email to my evidence folder. Then I forwarded it to the district attorney's office, attaching it to the case file number Judge Keene had opened. I got in my car and drove toward home. I wanted to shower. I wanted to wash the courthouse smell off my skin, but the phone rang again. It was a local number I didn't recognize. "Raven Garza?" A woman's voice. Sharp, professional, no nonsense. "Speaking. This is Investigator Hall with the Secretary of State's Notary Enforcement Division. I just got off the phone with Judge Keene's clerk. We have taken custody of Ms. Vance's journal." "She admitted it," I said. "In open court." "We know," Hall said. "She is currently in an interview room with the sheriff's deputies. She is very eager to talk. She is telling us about a pattern of favors she did for a specific group of real estate investors. It seems your parents were not her only clients." "They used my uncle," I said. "Lucas Moreno. He worked for Harborline." "We are aware of Mr. Moreno," Hall said, her tone flattening. "We have been looking at him for 6 months, regarding a different scheme involving senior citizens and reverse mortgages. Your case just gave us the notary link we were missing. So, what happens now?" "Now, it becomes a criminal investigation," Hall said. "You might be called as a witness, but for now, you just stay safe. These people, when they get cornered, they get unpredictable." "I know," I said. "I have cameras." I hung up. The web was bigger than I thought. My parents weren't just desperate. They were part of an ecosystem of fraud. They were grifters, and I was the mark that woke up. I arrived home at noon. The gray sedan was gone. The street was empty. I went inside, locked the heavy deadbolt, and checked the monitors. All quiet. I sat down on the sofa, finally allowing myself to close my eyes for a moment. But the peace didn't last. My phone pinged with a notification from the court system. I had signed up for alerts on my name. New filing. In re. The matter of Raven Garza. Case type. Probate/conservatorship. I stared at the screen. The blood draining from my face. Conservatorship. It was the nuclear option. It was the weaponization of love and concern. If they couldn't steal the house because I was the owner, they would try to steal me. I opened the document on my phone. It was an ex parte petition for appointment of temporary conservator. The allegations were breathtaking in their cruelty. Proposed conservatee, Raven Garza, is exhibiting signs of severe mental decline and paranoia. She has barricaded herself in her home. She has installed excessive surveillance equipment. She has cut off contact with family members who are trying to assist her. She believes her parents are trying to steal her home. Delusions of persecution. Petitioner, Elaine Garza, requests immediate temporary powers to manage the conservatee's estate and medical decisions to prevent financial ruin. They were using my defense as evidence of my insanity. They were spinning my locks and cameras, the very things keeping me safe, as symptoms of a breakdown. "You have got to be kidding me," I whispered. They wanted a judge to sign away my rights before I could even defend myself. They wanted to take control of my bank accounts, my house, my life, under the guise of helping me. I looked at the hearing time. 2 o'clock, Department 4, probate. I had 2 hours. I didn't panic. Panic is what they wanted. Panic looks like instability. I stood up and went to my printer. I printed my last 3 performance reviews from Redwood Meridian Systems. Exceeds expectations, highly logical, detail-oriented. I printed my annual physical results from last month. Patient is in excellent health. No history of psychiatric medication. I printed the transcript of the hearing from this morning where Judge Keene explicitly stated my parents were fraudsters. And then, I downloaded the video file from yesterday afternoon. The one from the doorbell camera. I got back in the car. I didn't even change out of my suit. I walked into the probate court at 1:45. My parents were there. They had a different lawyer this time, a woman who looked sympathetic and soft, the kind of lawyer you hire when you want to look like a heartbroken family. When they saw me walk in, fully dressed in a business suit, carrying a binder, my mother's face twitched. She expected me to be at home, crying, or maybe screaming at the police. She didn't expect me to beat them to the punch. The probate judge, Judge Silas, was an older man with a kind face. He read the petition. He looked concerned. "This is a serious allegation," Judge Silas said, looking at my parents. "You claim your daughter is a danger to herself?" "She is not herself, Your Honor," Elaine said, her voice trembling perfectly. "She thinks we are criminals. She has locked us out. She is watching cameras all day. We just want to get her help." "Your Honor," I said, standing up. "May I be heard?" Judge Silas looked at me. "You are the proposed conservatee?" "I am," I said. "And I am here to object. This petition is a retaliatory filing. It is an abuse of process designed to circumvent a restraining order issued by Judge Keene in Civil Department 12 less than 4 hours ago." I handed the bailiff my binder. "Tab 1, I said. "The order from this morning finding that these petitioners forged a deed to steal my home. My paranoia is actually a confirmed finding of fact by the Superior Court." Judge Silas's eyebrows shot up. He flipped to the order. He read the words, "void ab initio," and forgery. "Tab 2, I continued. "My medical records and employment records. I am a senior compliance officer for a Fortune 500 company. I was at work yesterday. I am not incapacitated." "And tab 3, I said. "A video from my front door yesterday. The petitioners claim I am delusional for thinking they are threatening me. Please watch the video." The bailiff played the file on the court monitor. My father's voice rang out, angry and demanding. My mother's voice, manipulative and cold. "You are being chased by the truth." Judge Silas watched it. He watched my parents banging on the door. He watched them plotting in the car. He took off his glasses. He looked at the sympathetic lawyer my parents had hired. "Counsel," Judge Silas said, Did your clients inform you that they were subject to a restraining order issued this morning? The lawyer looked at my parents, horrified. No, Your Honor. They told me it was a medical emergency. This is not a medical emergency, Judge Silas said, his voice hardening. This is a litigation tactic. And it is a particularly vile one. He threw the file onto his desk. Petition for temporary conservatorship is denied with prejudice. I am finding that this filing was made in bad faith. I am ordering the petitioners to pay sanctions in the amount of $5,000 to the court for wasting our time. He leaned forward, looking directly at Elaine. Ma'am, you are not a concerned mother. You are a litigant who lost. Do not try to weaponize this court again. If I see your name on my docket one more time, I will hold you in contempt and put you in a cell. Do you understand? Elaine didn't answer. She just stared at me, her eyes dead and cold. Get out, Judge Silas said. I walked out of the probate court. I felt a strange vibration in my pocket. My phone. I checked it in the hallway. It was David from Sovereign Bank. Ms. Garza, he said when I answered. I have an update. We confirmed the HELOC application was fraudulent. The IP address traces back to a residential address in the city. Let me guess, I said. Briarwood Lane? No, David said. It traces to a coffee shop on 4th Street, but the recovery email address, it matches a Victor Garza. They tried to drain the equity, I said. We have killed the application, David said. And we have forwarded the file to the FBI's mortgage fraud task force. Since it involves a federally insured bank, it is a federal crime. Thank you. David, I said. I hung up. I stood in the lobby of the courthouse. I had won 3 times in 24 hours. I had won the eviction. I had won the title. I had won my freedom. My phone buzzed again. A text message. Same unknown number as before. Stop it. You are going to ruin everyone. I looked at the message. It wasn't a threat anymore. It was a plea. It was the sound of someone realizing the walls were closing in. I didn't reply. I took a screenshot. I went to the court cafeteria, sat down at a sticky table, and opened my laptop. I wasn't done. They had tried to take my home. They had tried to take my mind. Now, I was going to take their ability to ever do this to anyone else. I opened a new document. I typed the header. Superior Court of California, Plaintiff. Raven Garza Defendants. Victor Garza. Elaine Garza. Lucas Moreno. Harborline Title Solutions. Complaint for damages, cause of action, 1. Slander of title. Cause of action, 2. Fraud and deceit. Cause of action, 3. Abuse of process. Cause of action, 4. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. Cause of action, 5. Civil RICO conspiracy. I wasn't writing this to get money. I knew they probably didn't have any liquid cash left, which was why they were trying to steal mine. I was writing this to create a permanent public record. I was writing it to attach a lis pendens, a notice of pending action, to every property they owned, including the rental on Briarwood. They wanted to play with paper? Fine. I was going to bury them in it. I typed the first paragraph. Plaintiff alleges that defendants engaged in a systematic conspiracy to deprive her of property rights through forgery, perjury, and malicious prosecution. I typed until my fingers hurt. I typed until the sun began to set through the atrium windows. I wasn't angry anymore. I was efficient. I was the record builder, and I was just getting started. I did not hire a lawyer to defend me. I hired a lawyer to finish them. After the probate hearing, the dynamic had shifted. I was no longer the prey. I was the one holding the spear. But I knew that in the world of high-stakes property fraud, being right isn't enough. You have to be procedurally bulletproof. I needed a shark who lived in the deep waters of title litigation. I found Elias Thorne through a referral from the bank's fraud department. He was a man who did not have a website and did not advertise. His office was a small, converted brownstone that smelled of old leather and expensive scotch. He didn't offer me coffee. He didn't ask how I was feeling. He sat behind a desk cluttered with red-weld files and looked at me over the rim of his spectacles. "Do you have the metadata?" he asked. That was his opening line. "I have everything," I said. I placed the flash drive on his desk. "I have the altered notary logs. I have the digital timestamps from the county recorder showing the file was uploaded by an agent named L. Moreno. I have the email from Harborline admitting the clerical error, and I have the court order voiding the deed." Thorne plugged the drive in. He clicked through the folders in silence for 10 minutes. He watched the video of my parents banging on my door. He read the transcript of Lorna Vance's confession. Finally, he leaned back. "This is not a dispute, Ms. Garza. This is an autopsy. They are already dead. They just haven't stopped moving yet." "I want to know why," I said. "I know they are greedy. I know they are controlling. But the urgency, the 6 a.m. eviction, the desperate attempt to get a line of credit 2 hours later, it feels like a panic." "People do not commit felonies for pocket change," Thorne said, "and they do not risk prison for a house they sold you 5 years ago unless the value of that house has changed." He picked up his phone. "I am sending a subpoena to Harborline Title Solutions, not just for the deed. I want every email, every internal memo, and every calendar invite associated with your address for the last 6 months. If your uncle was the conduit, he left a trail." 3 days later, the trail arrived in an encrypted zip file. I sat in Thorne's office as he projected the documents onto a wall monitor. It was a chain of emails between my father, Victor Garza, and a corporate address ending in https:// google.com/search $Q equals crownridge-dev .com. "Crown Ridge Redevelopment," Thorne said, reading the header. "They are the group handling the massive urban expansion project along the I-90 corridor. They are buying up older neighborhoods to rezone for mixed-use commercial and high-density luxury apartments." I scanned the email dated January 10th. From Acquisitions Director, Crown Ridge, to Victor Garza. Subject: Final offer for Parcel B, 1420 Oakwood Terrace. Victor: Per our discussion, we need clear title by February 5th to include the property in the Phase 1 demolition block. The offer stands at $1.2 million. If you cannot produce the deed by the deadline, we will bypass your lot and build the retaining wall right up to your property line, effectively killing the value. I felt the blood drain from my face. $1.2 million. The house was worth maybe $400,000 on a good day. But to the developer, it was the key piece of a puzzle, the Parcel B, that unlocked a multi-million-dollar project. "They weren't trying to evict me to save the family," I whispered, the realization making me nauseous. "They were flipping me. They were going to steal the house, sell it to Crown Ridge for triple the value, and leave me with nothing." "And the eviction deadline," Thorne pointed out. "February 3rd. They needed you out so they could change the locks and hand the keys to the developer's surveyors by February 5th. They were on a ticking clock. That is why they tried the HELOC," I said, connecting the dots. "When the judge stayed the eviction, they knew the deal might collapse. They tried to strip $200,000 of equity out of the house as a consolation prize before the title got frozen. It is pure, unadulterated greed," Thorne said, "and it gives us leverage." "What do we do?" I asked. "We wait," Thorne said, a cruel smile touching his lips. "Because right about now, Crown Ridge is calling them asking where the title is, and your parents are going to get desperate. They will reach out." He was right. The next morning, I received an email from a professional mediator. Subject: Settlement proposal/request for mediation. My parents were offering a truce if I agreed to meet them at a neutral office. They would drop their already dismissed claims and offer me a relocation assistance package of $50,000 to sign a quitclaim deed voluntarily, $50,000 to walk away from a $1.2 million payout They intended to pocket. "Do we go?" I asked Thorne. "Oh, we go," he said. "We go, and we let them talk. We get them to admit the motive on the record. In a mediation setting, statements are usually confidential, but not if they involve the commission of a future crime or fraud. We are going to let them hang themselves." The mediation took place in a glass-walled conference room in downtown. The neutral mediator sat at the head of the table. My parents sat on one side, flanked by yet another new lawyer. Damon Kress had evidently fired them. This new guy looked tired, like he had been paid up front and knew it was a bad idea. I sat opposite them. I didn't look at my father. I didn't look at my mother. I looked at the notepad in front of me. "We are here to find a family solution," the mediator began softly. "We just want to help Raven." My mother started. She was wearing a soft pink cardigan, trying to project warmth. "She cannot handle the upkeep of that big house. It is too much for a single woman. We are offering to take that burden off her shoulders and give her $50,000 cash. She can start fresh somewhere. Smaller." "That is very generous," the mediator said, looking at me. "Ms. Garza, what is your response?" I looked up. I kept my face blank. "Why?" I asked. "Why do you want the house so bad? You sold it to me 5 years ago. You have your own house. Why this sudden obsession with my property?" "Sentimental value," Victor lied smoothly. "It was your grandfather's land. We want to keep it in the trust." "But you aren't keeping it," I said. "You are buying it back. Why?" "To protect the asset," Elaine said, leaning forward. "Raven, honey, you don't understand the market. It is crashing. We want to get you out before you lose everything." "The market is crashing?" I asked, feigning ignorance. "So the house is losing value?" "Yes," Victor said. "It is a liability. We are doing you a favor." I looked at Thorne. He gave a microscopic nod. The trap was set. "So," I said slowly, "if I sign the deed to you today for $50,000, you are going to hold on to the house? You aren't going to sell it?" "Of course not," Elaine said quickly. "We would never sell the family home." "Then you won't mind if we add a deed restriction." Thorne spoke up for the first time. His voice was like grinding stones. "A clause that forbids the sale of the property for 10 years. If you sell it, all proceeds revert to Raven." The silence in the room was absolute. My parents froze. The new lawyer shifted uncomfortably. That is unreasonable," Victor stammered. "It restricts our property rights." "I thought you wanted to keep it in the family," I pressed. "If you aren't selling, the restriction doesn't matter." "You are being difficult," Elaine snapped, the mask slipping. "You don't understand the real value of that land. You are sitting on a gold mine and you are too stupid to see it." "There it is," Thorne said. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper. He slid it across the table. It wasn't a legal pleading. It was the printout of the email from Crown Ridge Redevelopment. Subject: Final offer for parcel. $1.2 million. My father stared at the paper. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. My mother went pale, her eyes darting from the paper to me, then to the mediator. "We know about Crown Ridge," Thorne said calmly. "We know about the deadline. We know that you weren't trying to protect Raven. You were trying to steal $1 million of equity that belongs to her. You were going to defraud your own daughter and the developer. That is privileged business information." The new lawyer tried to interject, but he sounded weak. "It is evidence of fraud," Thorne said. "And here is the other thing we know." He slid a second document across the table. "The HELOC application," Thorne said. "Submitted 2 hours after the eviction failed. You tried to borrow $200,000 against a house you didn't own, using a falsified income statement. That is bank fraud. That is wire fraud. And since Sovereign Bank is federally insured, the FBI is currently reviewing the file." Victor slumped in his chair. He looked like a balloon that had been pricked. "And finally," Thorne said, "we have the affidavit from the notary, Ms. Vance. She has confirmed that Elaine Garza personally brought the forged deed to her and asked for the backdated stamp. The mediator looked at my parents with undisguised disgust. I think this mediation is over, he said. Wait, I said. I stood up. I reached into my bag. I wasn't done. I had one more thing. The night before, while digging through the fire bag to organize my papers for Thorne, I had found an envelope I hadn't opened in years. It was tucked behind the original insurance policy. It was thick, yellowed vellum. My grandfather, Arthur, had been a hard man, but a fair one. He had bought the land 40 years ago. He knew my parents. He knew their spending habits. He knew their envy. I pulled out the handwritten letter. You keep talking about grandfather, I said, my voice steady. You keep saying this is about his legacy. Well, I found something he wrote. I unfolded the letter. My mother recognized the handwriting instantly. I saw her flinch. He gave me this letter the day he signed the money over to me to buy the house, I said. He told me to keep it safe. I never really understood why until today. I began to read. My dearest Raven, if you are reading this, it means there is trouble. I am giving you the money to buy the house because you are the only one in this family who understands that a home is a shelter, not a bank account. Your mother and father have always looked at land and seen only dollar signs. I fear that one day they will try to take this from you. They will say it is for your own good. They will say it is family business. Do not believe them. I have attached a codicil to my trust, recorded separately with my attorney, Mr. Henderson. It states clearly, if Victor or Elaine ever attempt to challenge your title or force a sale of the Oakwood property, they are to be immediately disinherited from the remainder of the family trust. Furthermore, any attempt by them to acquire the property triggers an automatic transfer of their share of the residual estate directly to you. I lowered the letter. He knew, I said softly. He knew you would do this. He set a trap for you from the grave. Elaine was shaking. That is not real. Papa wouldn't do that. Mr. Henderson is still alive, I said. I called him this morning. He has the original. By filing that lawsuit, by forging that deed, you didn't just lose the house. You triggered the disinheritance clause. You just lost your entire inheritance from Grandpa. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. My parents looked at each other. The realization hit them like a physical blow. In their greed to grab the $1.2 million from the developer, they had sacrificed the steady income they had been receiving from the family trust for years. They had gambled everything on a quick flip, and they had rolled snake eyes. You did this, Victor whispered to Elaine. You said it would be easy. Me? Elaine screeched, turning on him. You were the one who talked to the developer. You were the one who said she wouldn't fight back. They started arguing, right there in the conference room, screaming at each other, blaming each other. The facade of the united, loving family dissolved into a puddle of toxic recriminations. Let's go, I said to Thorne. We stood up. I walked past them. They didn't even notice me leaving. They were too busy tearing each other apart. I walked out of the building and into the cool afternoon air. The twist wasn't just that the house was worth millions. The twist was that my grandfather had handed me the gun years ago, and my parents had been the ones to pull the trigger. I looked at my phone. A notification from the security camera at home. Motion detected. I checked the feed. It was a courier. He was delivering a package. It was likely the formal offer from Crown Ridge Redevelopment, but this time it would be addressed to me. I smiled. I wasn't going to sell. Not yet. I was going to live there. I was going to renovate. And every morning, when I drank my coffee looking out at the street where the new road was supposed to go, I would know that I was the one roadblock they couldn't move, but there was one final act left to play. The criminal investigation was moving forward. The fallout was just beginning. I got in my car. I had one more stop to make before I went home. I was going to the cemetery. I had to go thank my grandfather. The final hearing took place 10 days after the mediation imploded. It was not a chaotic emergency session like the first one, nor was it a quiet procedural meeting. It felt like a coronation of the truth. The courtroom was packed, not with spectators, but with the sheer volume of evidence we had subpoenaed. My lawyer, Elias Thorne, stood at the podium. He did not shout. He did not pace. He simply laid out the timeline of the conspiracy like a master architect unveiling a blueprint. On the other side of the aisle, my parents sat with their new lawyer, a man who looked like he would rather be anywhere else on earth. They looked diminished. The arrogance that had fueled them at 6 o'clock on the morning of the eviction was gone, replaced by a hollow, jittery fear. "Your Honor," Thorne began, "what started as a simple unlawful detainer case has been revealed to be a complex, multi-layered conspiracy to defraud. We have subpoenaed the internal records from Harborline Title Solutions, and the results are definitive." He held up a stack of papers. "Exhibit G," Thorne said. "The internal compliance log from the title company. It shows that the appointment for the notary, Ms. Vance, was not booked by Raven Garza. It was booked by an email address registered to Elaine Garza. Furthermore, the intake form lists a specific rush fee of $500 paid to a third-party consultant." Thorne paused, letting the number hang in the air. "That consultant is listed as Lucas Moreno," Thorne continued, "the brother of the plaintiff, Elaine Garza. We have bank records showing a transfer of $500 from the joint account of Victor and Elaine Garza to Mr. Moreno on the day before the forged deed was recorded. They paid a family member to traffic a fraudulent instrument into the public record." Judge Keene looked at the bank statements. She looked at my parents. Her expression was unreadable, which was worse than anger. It was the look of a judge who was done listening to lies. "But the motive, Your Honor, is the most damning part," Thorne said. "We have obtained a letter from Crown Ridge Redevelopment." My father flinched. He actually physically recoiled in his seat. "Crown Ridge has formally rescinded their offer of $1.2 million for the property," Thorne announced. "They cite contaminated title and pending criminal litigation as the reasons. The defendants attempted to steal this home not to keep it in the family, but to liquidate it for a quick profit before the developer's deadline. They treated this court as a tool to facilitate a real estate flip." Thorne sat down. It was quiet. The air conditioning hummed. "Does the defense have anything to add?" Judge Keene asked. My parents' lawyer stood up slowly. "Your Honor, my clients, they admit that mistakes were made in the paperwork, but they maintain that their intent was benevolent. They are parents. They were worried about their daughter's financial future. They believe the sale was in her best interest." "Benevolent?" Judge Keene repeated the word, tasting it like spoiled milk. "They did it for the family," the lawyer said, using the line that had been their shield for decades. "Stop," Judge Keene said. She raised a hand. "I am going to stop you right there. Counsel." She looked directly at Victor and Elaine. "Family," the judge said, her voice echoing off the wood paneling, "is not a liability shield. Family does not exempt you from the penal code. And family certainly does not give you the right to weaponize the sheriff's department to terrorize your daughter at dawn." She opened the file containing the letter from my grandfather, the codicil I had found in the firebag. "I have reviewed the supplemental evidence regarding the trust of the late Arthur Moreno," Judge Keene said. "This document is admissible as evidence of the grantor's intent. It explicitly states that any attempt by Victor or Elaine Garza to challenge the title of the Oakwood property results in their immediate disinheritance." My mother let out a small, strangled sob. It wasn't a sob of sorrow. It was the sound of a woman watching her bank account evaporate. "The court finds that the condition has been triggered," Judge Keene ruled. "By filing the initial lawsuit, the defendants have effectively written themselves out of the family trust. The court orders that the trustee be notified immediately." She picked up her pen to sign the final judgment. "I am issuing a permanent order regarding the title," she declared. "The record of survey shall reflect that Raven Garza is the sole owner in fee simple. The fraud alert shall remain active indefinitely. Any future attempt by the defendants to record a document against this property will be considered a direct violation of this court's order and will result in immediate incarceration." She wasn't done. I am also granting the plaintiff's motion for damages for abuse of process, Judge Keene said. The defendants are ordered to pay all legal fees incurred by Ms. Garza, totaling $18,000, plus punitive damages in the amount of $50,000 for the intentional infliction of emotional distress and the fraudulent use of court resources. $50,000, the exact amount they had tried to bribe me with during the mediation. The irony was perfect. And finally, Judge Keene said, looking at the bailiff, I am transferring the full evidentiary record of this trial, including the admission of the notary and the bank records involving Mr. Moreno, to the District Attorney's Major Fraud Division. This is no longer a civil matter, it is a criminal one. My father stood up. Your Honor, please, we are respectable people. We have never been in trouble. Sit down, Mr. Garza, the judge snapped. You are not respectable. You are felons who haven't been booked yet. She slammed the gavel. Bang. Court is adjourned. I didn't look at them. I didn't want to see the ruin in their eyes. I just wanted to breathe. I gathered my papers, shook Elias Thorne's hand, and walked out of the courtroom. I felt lighter than I had in years. The weight of their expectations, their control, their manipulation, it was all gone, stripped away by the harsh, cleansing light of the law. Weeks passed. The seasons began to change. The biting cold of February gave way to the tentative warmth of early March. I spent the money renovating the house. I tore down the old wallpaper in the hallway. I repainted the kitchen a bright, airy yellow. I replaced the front door, not because the lock was broken, but because I wanted a door that had never known the vibration of their pounding fists. I kept the cameras, though trust is a luxury I could no longer afford. The developer, Crown Ridge, moved on. They built their retaining wall around my property line, leaving my house as a strange, defiant island in the middle of a construction zone. I didn't mind. The noise of the jackhammers sounded like victory. Then came the morning that closed the circle. It was exactly 6 o'clock in the morning. I was asleep in my bedroom, the same room where I had been jolted awake weeks ago. The sound came from downstairs. Knock, knock, knock. It was authoritative. It was heavy. It was the knock of the law. My eyes snapped open. For a split second, the old panic flared. My heart hammered against my ribs. Did they find a loophole? Did they find a new judge? Is the sheriff back to throw me out? I grabbed my phone and checked the camera feed. There was a police cruiser in the driveway. But it wasn't Deputy Briggs. It was a plain sedan with lights on the dash. 2 detectives in suits stood on the porch. And then I looked across the street. The curb was empty. The gray sedan was not there. My parents were not standing by the neighbor's mailbox. They were not watching. I put on my robe. I walked down the stairs. My legs didn't shake. I walked to the door, my new, solid door, and unlocked it. I opened it to the cool morning air. Raven Garza? The lead detective asked. He was a man with gray hair and a kind face. Yes, I said. I am Detective Harris, Major Fraud Division, he said, showing his badge. I apologize for the early hour. We wanted to catch you before work. It is okay, I said. I am awake. We are here to inform you that we have executed arrest warrants this morning for Victor Garza, Elaine Garza, and Lucas Moreno, Harris said. They were taken into custody about an hour ago at their residence. I stood there, processing the words, taken into custody, handcuffs, fingerprints, mugshots. What are the charges? I asked. Conspiracy to commit real estate fraud, forgery of a public document, grand theft, and elder abuse due to the financial exploitation of the trust. Harris listed them off like a grocery list. We also have a statement from the notary, Ms. Vance. She turned state's evidence yesterday. I see, I said. We might need you to come down later this week to give a formal victim impact statement, Harris said. But for now, you don't need to worry. They are being held without bail because of the flight risk associated with their offshore accounts. Without bail, I repeated. Yes, ma'am, Harris said. They aren't going anywhere. Thank you, Detective, I said. "Have a good day, Ms. Garza," he said. He turned and walked back to his car. I didn't close the door immediately. I stood in the doorway, looking out at the street. The sun was just starting to crest over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. It was 6:15, the exact time my mother had called out to me. "We are doing this for the family." I looked at the spot where she had stood. It was just an empty patch of sidewalk now. The shadows were gone. I thought I would feel happy. I thought I would feel a surge of triumph, a desire to pump my fist in the air. But I didn't. Revenge, real revenge, doesn't feel like a party. It feels like silence. It feels like the sudden absence of noise. My parents were in a cell. They were facing years in prison. They had lost the house, the money, the trust, and their daughter. They had gambled everything on the idea that I was weak, and they had lost because they didn't realize that I was the one who had been keeping their secrets all along. I stepped back inside. I closed the door. I locked the deadbolt. Click. I walked into the living room and sat on the sofa. The morning light cut across the floor, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I was alone. And for the first time in my life, alone didn't mean lonely, it meant safe. I picked up my coffee cup from the table. It was cold, but I took a sip anyway. "It is over," I whispered to the empty room. I didn't need them to love me. I didn't need them to treat me fairly. I just needed the truth to be signed, sealed, and delivered. And now, finally, the record was built. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment down below and share your thoughts on the ending. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Nina Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit the notification bell so more people can hear this story.